Okay, so this is chapter 14. And again, this is the one you've been looking for. This is the final one of our series and of our class here. So again, congratulations on reaching the end here. And like we said, chapters 12, 13, and 14 will make up the Unified exam here this week. So chapter 14, again, talks about, evolution and speciation and extinction. And we've already touched on it a little bit here as far as how that works. And we said, roughly 3.8 billion years ago is when life began on Earth. And obviously we've had a lot of things go on in that time, mutations, things like that, and how does it produce new species? And first, it says we must explore what defines a species. So a species is defined by a gentleman named Carolus Linnaeus, and he created the binomial naming system for living things. Binomial meaning two names, the genus and the species. And it says here, for instance, the scientific name for humans is Homo sapiens. In the plant world, there are genus and species for a lot of different things as well. And when I was in undergrad, I had to learn all kinds of plant names. So I'm a wealth of these strange Latin sounding names, which is the root language for most of the genus and species of these different animals and creatures. And again, all biotic living things. More recently, the biological species concept defines species based on their potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So genus kind of puts them into a classification, and then species means specific things. So for instance, Medicago sativa. Medicago sativa is a type of plant that, again, and a common name is alfalfa. Now, there's other medicagos. There's Medicago tricunculata, which is a black medic plant that is a cousin with that. And the genus infers that it's got a relationship. The species means that it's a particular one. Now, I will caution you that species names often are repeated. So, for instance, Medicago sativa, for instance, alfalfa, which some of you may feed your cows or horses, is not cannabis sativa, which of course would be marijuana. Even though sativa is the same species name, they are not cousins to each other because they have different genus groups, cannabis and Medicago. So that's how we break things down into species. Speciation is the formation of a new species that happens when individuals can no longer interbreed with the rest of the group. They become their own species. There are reproductive barriers that cause speciation. If the potential to interbreed defines species, reproductive isolation results in new species. So you see this mountain range here, and on one side of the mountain range, you have these plants that produce yellow flowers, and on the other side, these plants produce the pink flower. Now, the foliage may be a lot the same shape, may look very similar, but they have been separated for so long, they are diverged now in the type of species that they are. And a lot of times, speciation means that, again, that it will not interbreed with each other. These pre-zygotic reproductive barriers occur before the formation of the zygote or fertilized egg. So in other words, it prevents fertilization. So you have habitat isolation, where again, you have different environments. The ladybugs feed on different plants depending on what side of the world they're on. Temporal isolation, active or fertile at different times. Field crickets mature at different rates, and then obviously become mature at different rates, which means they reproduce at different rates. Behavioral isolation, different courtship activities, such as a frog mating calls. Obviously, they're not going to mate with each other if they have a different call. Mechanical isolation, where the mating organs or pollinators are incompatible. We've seen, the moths that have the specialized tongues that will fertilize the flowers. In this case, we have bees that, have certain plants they can fertilize and others they cannot. And then gametic isolation, where the gametes cannot unite. And then different species of sea urchins, for instance, are not compatible with each other. The sperm and egg will not match up. So those are prezygotic, meaning that it happens before fertilization. Postzygotic reduces the fitness of offspring produced by members of two different species. So this prevents the development of fertile offspring. So hybrid it's a hard word to say, inviability is where a hybrid offspring failed to reach maturity, and meaning that the crossbred will not breed with the other, maybe the parent, something like that. It's its own species at that point. Hybrid infertility, lions and tigers cross making a liger. It's infertile. We have mules that are infertile, that are crosses as well. And then you have hybrid breakdown, where the second generation hybrid offspring have reduced fitness. It says the offspring of hybrid mosquitoes often have abnormal genitalia, and that does not allow them to mate. So again, those will be postzygotic, meaning that you do have an organism formed, but it is not, for whatever reason here, able to reproduce. So again, reproductive barriers arise in a couple of different ways, depending on the spatial patterns. You have an allopatric or sympatric speciation. Allopatric is a barrier that physically separates a population into two groups. And we see that with the mountain range again, an allopatric. With no gene transfer between the two populations, each proceeds down its own evolutionary line. And eventually, genetic differences, as we see here, between the populations give rise to one or more reproductive barriers. So allopatric, you're actually separated here. Sympatric, you see continuous contact between the populations, but they're no longer able to breed with each other. And Galapagos turtles, we talked about those tortoises there, diverge into several subspecies on different islands because of this spatial speciation. They are separated by such distance that they've done their own thing now, and they've become their own species because they have been isolated for so long. Sympatric speciation, as we said, populations diverge genetically while sharing a habitat. And we see an example of this. We have cichlids. By the way, cichlids, there's a lot of cichlids in the world in the fish. It's pretty easy. Go to Petco sometime and go by the fish tank, draw your line, your finger in a line across the tanks. Those fish that chase it are probably cichlids. This is also the, what the piranha are in, or the cichlids. But in this case, we have cichlids that have developed in the same lake, but one has a shallow habitat, one has a deep habitat. And because of this, they stay isolated from each other, even though they're in the same body of water. They are found at different depths and do no longer, mate with each other. They're their own separate species. Sympatric speciation also occurs when gametes unite to form polyploids. And this is offspring with more chromosomes than either parent. A polyploid organism might form when gametes from two species unite, producing the first cell of a new species. So you see the gametes here from Old World cotton and South and Central American cotton. These are the two parents, and both of them have 13 chromosomes. You see N13 here. They contribute that, and they get 26 in fertilization. And then we can cultivate that into American cotton and double that to 52. This is called polyploidism. Now, doesn't work real well for animals, but there's a lot of polyploids in the plant world. But at this point, it is its own different new variety, okay? And it will no longer usually mate with Old World cotton or the South Central American cotton. Now, the fossil record supports two hypotheses about the pace of evolution. There's gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Gradualism, again, suggests that evolution proceeds in small incremental changes over many generations. And if you remember back to our timeline, we started with chapter 12, Charles Lyell and Lamarck and all of them kind of got on board with gradualism, meaning that it takes long periods of time for generations to change. Punctuated equilibrium suggests that long periods of little change are interrupted by bouts of rapid change. So we see both here. And it says evolution might occur quickly when a key adaptation arises. For instance, the first flowering plants diversified quickly as flowers provided a new option for reproduction. And once it kind of took off, all these different species arose at a roughly quick period of time. Now, quick in evolutionary terms is still thousands of years. So again, if their hopes are there for you to sprout wings one day, it's probably not going to happen. It's again over a long period of time, but that punctuated equilibrium again can be brought on by some stressors that we talked about, like before, the founder effect, where you have a small group that seeds an area. You might see more changes in that respect, or a bottleneck effect, or there are ecological factors that can make this happen. And it might also occur quickly following a mass extinction, which again we said was something that could really change the environment here. And of course, a species extinct when all of its members have died. So, you go back to that last great mass extinction event, the dinosaurs and everything left out, and you're left with, animals that are in the mammal family that we're not familiar with today. Again, we don't have the saber-toothed tiger or the woolly mammoth, but again, they succeeded the Triassic period and the dinosaur period here in the Mesozoic, and of course have evolved since then. So we've had extinctions, as we talked about, at different levels throughout the timeline of the Earth here. And as best we know, there's been 5 mass extinctions in the last 600 million years. And during these periods, many species went extinct. And you can see here, again, here's the total extinction rate. And you see these periods where it just really jumps up there. And, and again, that means that something happened in the environment that obviously a large percentage of the life that was here died off. Now, why did that happen? Well, of course, you've probably heard about the impact theory, and that's a theory that suggests that meteorites or comets caused some mass extinctions. The debris suspended in the atmosphere after collision dramatically changed the environment, leading to extinction of many species. Obviously, if you're really close to one of these things, it's going to vaporize things there. The Yucatan Peninsula, if you've ever been on a cruise down in the Gulf, you've been probably through the Yucatan Peninsula, and again, it's theorized that's an impact site. They have some sediment layers in there that go with that. And again, you're talking about massive extinction level events if a large comet hits the Earth, and it's going to be a bad deal. Plate tectonics can also explain mass extinction events. When these things break and split, again, usually move very slowly. It's very, very smooth. But there are times when it shifts and grinds here, these tectonic plates, causing massive tidal waves, can cause super volcanoes to erupt, things of that nature. Again, obviously, mass extinction level event type stuff. Now, of course, humans are changing the biosphere so much that we may be experiencing a 6th mass extinction based upon human interaction and the things that we have done. Obviously, as more people come along, we push other life forms to the side, especially in very urban areas. Rural areas, even as you can see with the farming there, does away with some native life, displaces that. Logging here, especially in the Amazon, is a concern because again, that's basically the lungs of the planet where those trees are. And as more and more people pile up, other biological life will go by the wayside. So all those things are obviously a concern. Now, when we classify, all these, genus and species, these plants together, it's part of taxonomy, which is the science of describing and naming plants and animals, and again, all biotic organisms. So aloe vera, I think probably all of you have heard of aloe vera plant. There's a number of species, is a one. The aloe vera plants, again, are in the genus Aloe. There are 500 aloe genus plants. Family, about 785. Orders of the lily, around 1,200. Class, around 65,000. The phylum, around 235,000. Kingdom, they're in the plant kingdom, roughly 375. And eukarya, which means they have a nucleus, there's several million in that. So you start with domain, go all the way to species. Now, back in the day, and how you would memorize this thing, or how I had to memorize this thing, the little mnemonic tool we had was King Philip came sailing over from Great Spain. Domains, again, we got 3 of them. There's archaea, there's bacteria, and eukarya. We didn't have to mess with domains. So king, Philip, king, sailing, subclass. I had to learn subclass as well. It's not listed on there. Over is order from Great Spain. If you can remember that and want to use that, feel free to do so. Phylogenetics is the evolutionary study of relationships among species. These phylogenetic trees show relationships based on descent from common ancestors. So on ancestry.com, I've referenced that before, 23andMe, there are these lines that separate out, and you'll have a common ancestor, and then you break off and move down through here. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is much of what we're seeing right here, is that we have a common ancestor, and then we're all related to that common ancestor. And obviously, the closer you are together, the more you are related, the stronger the relationship. So a cladogram then would be a type of phylogenetic tree, and a clade is a group of organisms consisting of a common ancestor and all of its descendants. So again, you see birds and non-avian dinosaurs, the raptors and things like that, that are typically associated with birds. And they're closely related, and then they're more closely related to crocodiles, which in the grand scheme of things would be more closely related to lizards and snakes. And then you move away from there, you get obviously way down here where they have the last common ancestor. Tracing the taxa back to their common ancestor reveals evolutionary relatedness. And according to this cladogram, again, a bird is more closely related to a dinosaur than what it is even a crocodile. So again, strength of relationships based upon genetic similarities, DNA, protein structures, things like that. Now, the last part here says birds do it, bees do it. Again, talking about plant species and speciation here, and having pollinators. It says scientists have hypothesized that mutation changed the flower color of some mimulus plants, which you see right here, starting the speciation event that separated the 2 species. To test this hypothesis, researchers used selective breeding to create a variety of each species that mimic the color of the other species. So you see, here's the wild type monkey flower and selectively bred one, the wild type scarlet monkey flower and selectively bred one. And what they found was that the new varieties had different frequencies of pollinator visits than the wild type varieties. So again, the wild type, 15.4 visits from bumblebees, 0.012 or 0.02 from hummingbirds, not very often. Selectively bred, 2.63, 1.44. But look at how that changes when you get down here to those that are, the selectively bred from the wild type here. So you can see there is quite a difference in selectivity here. And a mutation in the gene affecting the flower color may have caused a shift in pollinator preferences. So the bees might have preferred one color, whereas the hummingbirds preferred another one. And this reproductively isolated some individuals in the same population. So again, we talk about allopatric and sympatric at the start of the lecture. This would be sympatric. They're in the same area, but a color change had led to different pollinators and led them on a divergent route from each other to where you ended up into 2 species because of that. Okay, so that finishes our notes. And again, chapters 12, 13, 14 make up unit 5 lecture test for this week. And again, this will finish our chapter discussions.